I tell him, you are Italian mafia.
And he looks like Russian mafia.
There is something rather humiliating about reaching Moscow on a journey around the world, only to discover that, while the world itself has no objection to being circumnavigated, the administration does. As you might know or imagine, our plan was to continue east, towards Kazakhstan and then Mongolia, a perfectly respectable plan. Unfortunately, it collided with a bureaucratic detail we did not know about. Apparently, when a car temporarily enters the Eurasian Economic Union through a border with the European Union, it must also leave through a border with the European Union. At least, that's what we have been told by the border guards. They might be wrong, but as you may know or imagine, arguing with a border guard is a pointless hobby. In practical terms, this meant that instead of continuing heroically across Asia, our expedition had to perform the least heroic maneuver known to travelers, the U-turn. Under normal circumstances, this would simply mean driving back. But it was winter. Winter in Russia is no joke. Snow drifts the size of 10-story buildings, ice everywhere, and a storm from time to time to keep things interesting. Silvana was designed for Mediterranean flirtation, not for Siberian survival. So we arranged a temporary separation. She left Moscow on the back of a tow truck. I left Moscow on a train. More precisely, a Russian Platzkart carriage, which is less of a train compartment and more of a sociological experiment. If you have watched my episode about the joys of Platzkart travel, you are familiar with it, so I'll spare you the details. For 24 hours, we traveled apart. Silvana carried by a gazelle, me horizontally stacked with strangers and their luggage. I was the first to arrive in Brest, which proves that Platzkart trains, despite their ideological shortcomings, are faster than tow trucks. Silvana, meanwhile, was somewhere on the frozen roads of Belarus, advancing at approximately the speed of continental drift. I found myself with a couple of hours to feel, which is the sort of unplanned liberty that usually deteriorates into eating. So I entered a restaurant. Before I had even removed my gloves, a plate appeared in front of me. Before I had understood what the plate contained, the food disappeared. Meanwhile, Silvana arrived on her magic carpet. The reunion was emotional, though a bit frosty. She started reluctantly with an offended cough. She forgave me quickly. Her engine warmed, her indignation faded, and soon she was vibrating with her usual mechanical optimism. The kind gazelle deposited us both at the border. It was time to leave the Eurasian Economic Union and re-enter the European one. If there is one reason border guards secretly adore me, it is that I never fail to make their day with a fair dose of trouble. This time was no exception. Here's the situation. This is the border barrier. This is the passport control booth. Silvana got down from the tow truck here. She started her engine, and together we rolled the 100 meters separating the two. Once at the booth, the gentlemen guarding the border have informed me that Silvana had been driven on Belarusian roads without insurance. The reality is rather different. First of all, Silvana does have valid international insurance, which she has held for over 10 years and which I duly presented to the border guards. By all rights, this should have been the end of the conversation. But they insisted on a different type of insurance, one that only they can provide. Second, Silvana did not touch Belarusian roads. She has traveled for 1,000 kilometers levitating above them, never once making contact. She descended to earth at the border and rolled gently for 100 meters across a landscape of potholes and craters that could not, by any reasonable definition, be described as a road. I show them photographs and videos of Silvana on the tow truck. They examine the evidence with the blank expression of people for whom evidence is merely decorative. And now comes the real masterpiece: the geography of their insurance office. When entering Belarus from Poland, the office is located before passport control. Drivers are invited to purchase their special type of insurance before being asked to have it. Logical. But when leaving Belarus towards Poland, the office is after passport control, which means that purchasing their insurance before being accused of not having it is structurally impossible. To summarize: 1. Silvana had valid insurance. 2. She had not been driven on Belarusian roads. 3. The 100 meters of potholes at the border do not qualify as a road. And 4. The Belarusian insurance office was on the other side of passport control. But logic, like good manners, is not compulsory at borders. Eventually, the conversation reached its philosophical conclusion. I was asked to pay a fine. It's always about money, isn't it? And when the people discussing the fine are carrying rifles, one tends to become rather cooperative. So I paid. With our pockets lined, the barrier lifted like magic, and at last we were able to proceed towards Poland. By then, night had fallen, a phenomenon that tends to occur at borders when incompetence is performed with enthusiasm. After hours of advancing at 2 centimeters per hour, crossing the river Bug allowed Silvana to stretch her legs a little. This moment of freedom ended exactly where Poland began. On the opposite bank waited another queue, promising 3 additional hours of doing absolutely nothing, but with different officials. Yet the time was not entirely wasted. While engines idled and drivers lost their patience, Silvana found herself serving as backdrop for a photo shoot. No further incidents to report. Somehow we crawled out of the Polish border stiff and frozen. All I know is that at some point we were through. The weather that was at 3 a.m. or 5, I could not say. We drove for 3 quiet hours through the darkness before finally stopping to sleep. Now we must invent a plan B. The dream of driving around the world remains intact. We're just going to have to take a different route. A minor inconvenience, really.